colleagues. I think we can start now. Thank you for joining us for this session. Before we go for the most exciting thing about visiting the Great Wall, I think this is the last session, and appreciate your participation and engagement in the questions we have today. To begin with, as you know, the digital technologies have advanced very rapidly, and then compared to any other innovation, I think the stride digital technology has taken in the use within the governance processes has been phenomenal, if not multifold. The good news is that the digital technologies are used by over 50% of population in the developing countries, and the amount of data that was generated in the past 3 years surpasses all the data that was created in entirety, as well as how it's been used for governance processes. United Nations, I think, has rightly prioritized digitalization as very critical in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. The not so good news is that the progress made so far is not sufficient at all, and it does not address the demand for digital technologies in strengthening the public services. COVID-19, which we all know has accelerated suddenly and very rapidly the use of digital technologies, also pointed to us some of the limitations in applying these technologies for public services. And one of the issues which came out when our office did an evaluation of UNDP support to digitalization of public services is that the digital public infrastructure, as we call it, which is the digital legal identity, data interoperability, and digital finances, remain a major issue in advancing digitalization of the public services. There are many areas the countries need to address to make strides in how these technologies are applied to strengthen citizen services. The other issue we've also found that was very limited attention was paid to data security. This we have seen also in advanced countries as well, but the challenges in the program countries are very much more significant. The third issue that stood out was about the individual privacy, how data is managed and how individuals' rights to privacy are respected. I think this is something also which came out of the evaluation. I'm sure our excellent panel we have today, a combination of government officials and also a colleague from the UNDP, they will discuss some of these issues and the lessons that they bring to this discussion. Today we will be addressing 3 questions in this discussion. The format is there'll be an half an hour of the opening session where the panelists will make presentations or share insights from their countries on the questions on what are the lessons for building strong digital public infrastructure, how private sector and other actors are being used in the countries to strengthen digital public services. And the second question is, how can we ensure equitable access to public services? We know that there have been a lot of inequalities in how these services are addressed, whether it is rural-urban divide, whether it's gender divide or demographic divide. And these are some of the issues the panelists will discuss. And lastly, how can we ensure data security and also individual privacy, security, and rights? This is the third question. And after the panelists make their initial observations, we'll have a breakout session looking at this group, maybe 2 or 3 groups. Initially, we thought if there are more Chinese participants, we can have a separate group, but we will have 3 groups, each group discussing one of the questions. The first group will discuss looking at the lessons to strengthen the digital public infrastructure. The second one on inclusion, how there can be more digital inclusion. And the last one is on data security and individual privacy. So that's how it is. And when the group discussion happens for 30 minutes, after that, each group will identify one person who will come and make, at least share 5 insights from what the group has discussed. and then the panelists will make the closing remarks. So that's the format we have today. Let me very quickly introduce the panelists. We have a young colleague from China, Jiamin Xu, is an associate researcher at the Institute of International Development Cooperation, part of the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation, CAITE, under the Ministry of Commerce. Jiamin has research interests in energy, climate, environment, humanitarian assistance, and use of technology. Aziza Umarova is the head of the delivery unit within the Agency for Strategic Reforms under the President of Uzbekistan. Besides her work with the government, Aziza brings nearly a decade of invaluable experience from her tenure at UNDP at the Global Center of Public Sector Excellence in Singapore and heading UNDP governance portfolio in Uzbekistan. We have Gayan Peiris, who is the head of the data and technology at the Chief Digital Office in UNDP in New York. Gayan brings the experience in how digitalization has been promoted within UNDP. He leads the digital enablement strategy within the organization, overseeing the transformation of UNDP's operations to responsibly leverage digital technologies. And lastly, we have a colleague from the government of South Africa, Fathi Mazibuko, Director of the Monitoring and Evaluation within the government of South Africa. Fathi has over 20 years of experience in monitoring and evaluation, and also worked at the Statistical Office, managing the statistical system of South Africa. I invite all the panelists to this discussion, and thank you again for being here. Let me first invite our young colleague, Jiamin, to make her remarks.
And hello, everyone. Before I start in my part, I want to say that I'm not the expert in evaluation or digitalization as the other representatives. I'm an assistant researcher from KaiTech, affiliated with the Ministry of Commerce. And our institute focuses on the research of China's international development cooperation and China's foreign aid and policies, and we work closely with CITICA and Ministry of Commerce, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And my part would be more about how China digitalized the public sector and benefiting the marginalized group, and how can these experiences be replicated in other developing nations. So we know that digital technology can be applied across all industries and holds immense potentials to innovate development models and enhancing the effectiveness of the international cooperation. In foreign aid and relevant management departments are exploring the use of digital tools in project design and monitoring and post-implementation evaluations, making the whole project managing and planning assessments more accurate. And China has made great efforts in developing the Digital Plus model in various areas, including public health and education, agriculture, humanitarian assistance, and etc. And given our limited time, I will give a brief intro on the digitalization of healthcare in China and in other developing nations. The digital technology can span the entire health management value chain, for example, from the diagnosis, treatment, to medication, rehabilitation, and it can enable online consultations, medicine, and internet-based hospitals, and also online health insurance payments. In terms of the intelligence screening, and during the COVID-19 pandemic, we know that these AI systems were trained to analyze millions of X-rays, and its accuracy rate can be increased into nearly 90%. And take Tencent's AI system as an example. During the COVID-19, the screening system of Tencent reached the accuracy rate over 90% and greatly reducing the burden on healthcare workers, and especially reduce the burden for health workers in remote areas in China. And digital empowerment can also strengthen the medical teams in developing countries and aiding them, like building the partner hospitals and expanding their influence to local and grassroots levels. In this way, this digital technology boosts the capacity of primary healthcare. And based on our research and fieldwork in developing nations, we know that the primary healthcare is one of the major focus of developing and underdeveloped nations. And just to take the development of primary healthcare as an example, just some background information that each country would divide their health system into 6 or 7 levels. The 6th or 7th level would be the highest level, which means the national level with the best doctors, the best technologies. And the first level, sometimes the first level health facilities, in most times they don't even have one doctor or nurse or any diagnosis device. So in this way, a lot of countries, most of their populations will go to the 3rd and 2nd level of health facilities, and this is the major concern of their primary health care. So what the digital empowerment can do for the 3rd and 2nd level of health facilities, if the AI system that I mentioned before can be used in this scenario, then the largest amount of people can be treated by experienced doctors hundreds and thousands miles away. But in most underdeveloped regions, their internet does not support uploading the diagnosis results to the cloud. Here we may come across the problem of digital divide and data privacy and lack of the basic internet services. Underdeveloped regions face even larger gaps than other regions. The example I make is only in the area of primary healthcare, and they also face larger gaps in the education, agriculture, and etc. And maybe we can talk about it later. That's all.
Thank you very much. It's a great privilege and pleasure to be here. In the interest of time, maybe we just quickly go through some of the snippets of our work at the delivery unit that I would like to present to you, but also invite for more discussions around the topic once we have the breakout sessions. I think what is really important to start by saying that while there is digital, of course, divide, but also anything that leaves digital trace can be really empowering tool to actually reduce the disparities. And I would like to argue that data that is being collected through digital means enables decision-making that makes sure that there is no one left behind, and that's very important to say that data has the ability to consolidate and rearrange societal power structure. How we are trying to do it, I'll present in the next slides. What is really important, unless you have a real data and evidence collected through digital way, because it provides you access to big data, to the huge, massive data, not just 1-2 lines provided by the responsible minister. You're able to really track the performance of the public investment, be it loans, be it budget, be it grant support from international community. And what is really important, you're also able to make sure that there is no overspending or underspending, but actually it's much more equitable than it would be otherwise by a classic way of reporting and relying on administrative data. Very clear example, in my team, we have data analysts, we have data scientists, we have GIS specialists. We do focus on the social sectors. So it's public health, it's public education, and it's water, because these are for Uzbekistan pressing needs and priorities. We are a very young country. Demographic is 70% of population are below 30. So this is something that is important and close to the heart of the government and the president. We focus on data because we believe it's important to collect data. So if you have a very specific target, we need to bring drinking water to the schools, we do rely on the data that shows us on the map where the schools are, but also the data on the wells. And then we using GIS list cost path analysis, again, we do it in-house with our team, we are able to calculate the most cost-effective way to bring drinking water to the schools. And of course, we also know clearly where it's impossible for different reasons, and then we can put in a pipeline for future project investments. Another example I would like to show is how we are doing analysis based on the data, and we were able to collect the mapping on 10,000 public schools in the country, all public schools in the country, within a month. Because we used open source solution, we used application web service on the phones, we do it in-house as well, and we basically reached out to 10,000 schools administrators asking to populate for us 55 parameters on infrastructure, starting from where school was built all the way to whether they have sewage, drinking water, heating system, and other things. And then we get the data on the schools with demographic data. How many people are below 7? Because in our country we start school at 7, not at 5 like in Great Britain. We also get data about the land use, data about available infrastructure, so gas, electricity, water, but also climate change, because there will be regions, according to UN reports, where climate change will drive people away, so that in 20 years' time, most probably people will leave the region and move to the next one. And in this case, it's important before you start rushing with building the school, whether you calculate clearly and a sober mind about the future potential audience for the school. So based on this, we've done machine learning, we've done modeling, and we've specifically identified 12 communities where the new schools should be built. So that every single dollar that's being spent on the school construction really comes in with analysis, with a big data, with being able to model that one. And that's what we presented to the Ministry of Economy and Finance and the Ministry of Public Education as a place for construction of the new schools, and it is taken on board for the new investment program. This is example for on the cancer control. So because we started doing a lot with data, as you see, we're also big fans of visualizing data. We've done the assessment. Data comes from the machines, mammographic screening. Everyone who is now using digital mammographs to take screening of the breast as a prevention and screening of the breast cancer, we do leave trace. So we use the data from the mammographic screening to also show the gaps where the women were not able to get proper support. It's the next one. It's about the schools as well. And basically now we are designing the new cancer control program, making sure that the data on those who were identified as a cancer patient but never reached to the stage of the treatment will be really picked in the system early enough. But if there was no digital mammographic screening, if there was no digital trace left and then used for policy decision making, most probably the new program on the cancer control would never appear. Just last slide, what we do with all of this. Yeah, so we realize beauty is in the data. We realize it's time to move from traditional classic reports in Excel sheet to really big data, work with a myriad of data sets sent by different technological equipments, by people, asking people, collecting data through remote sensing, through GIS. We love maps as well. It's time to make it institutionalized. So first of all, the quality. If there is no quality inputs in the system, garbage in, garbage out, go, very famous saying. So we focus on the quality of data by designing right now the new law on the public data governance. It will make sure that the data in a right format put in the data lake to be shared by all ministers. So that it also gives opportunity to triangulate data, not just rely on GIS sensing, while you also should triangulate with data from other ministers to make sure that there's really adequate evidence for future evaluations of the effectiveness of the government expenditures. We are also, once you have a big data lake, then you can use your machine training learning the language modeling with this and promote AI. So we are playing with that now, trying to make customized version in Uzbek language as well, like analog of ChatGPT. For that, you need big, massive data. And last but not the least, how to make it also priority for the government, for the state, and keep it priority for the next several years is also to make sure there is dashboard that will just bring the right people and outliers and good performing ministers to the presidential level on a regular basis. A dashboard, so to speak. That's what I wanted to share, saying that data provide the wealth of opportunities. However, it's important to do anonymization of data before it's being brought to any data lake. That's very important. The best reference point in my view right now is GDPR. It's European Union standards for that. Please do check before you rush to collect data, so that none of the data should be personalized. It should be anonymized, and there is very clear guidelines for that and recommendations. And second, very important things, it's they should be approved authority to access data by different ministries. Tax authority, if you're using fiscal checks, they do have a wealth of data. They should not distribute that one. But if they anonymize, they should be distributing. In some countries now moving to quantifying inflation based on the fiscal checks. It's already making a history. So if you want to catch the wave, we should think about that, but please make sure that no personal data is being used for any reasons, only anonymized. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aziza. May I now invite Gayan for your observations from the international organization perspective?
I may need the clicker as well. I do have a presentation as well, there it is. So we are at a moment of what we call a polycrisis countries. Because there's, on one side, there's a humanitarian crisis. There is with natural disasters, there's a crisis, climate crisis, and financial crisis in many cases. So digitalization or digital provides that opportunity for governments to mitigate some of these, not just mitigate, sometimes accelerate the progress towards SDGs as well. And add to the mix AI now. According to a recent report, AI will add about 13 trillion to the global economy by 2030. But the question I have for you, the question we have to ask ourselves is this transformation inclusive? Are we widening the digital gap? About 2.6 billion people are still not connected to the internet. But those who are connected, is the access meaningful? Is the access affordable? Are the marginalized groups and most vulnerable groups, have they been connected? So in this context, UNDP believes that digital is a strong force for the people and the planet. However, if the clicker works, okay, we see challenges in digital divide in countries, especially when it comes to capacity. We see major challenges in countries, and the digital also brings a risk to human rights and including privacy that we talked about here, and the fragmented digital programs. Now I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on some of these challenges. From the days of the pandemic, we see people jumping into digital solutions, whether it be an education platform, a health platform, a social protection platform. From that, now we are seeing governments taking a more ecosystem-based approach, a digital ecosystem approach. What if that health system the same ID can be used for your social protection system? What if the data can be exchanged? What if the systems are interoperable? So from a fragmented approach, going into that holistic and a strategic approach for the country. And from the techno-optimism, technology will solve all the problems, to really moving into rights-based, understanding the risk that comes with technology, rights-based and inclusion-first approach. And that is what UNDP promotes as well. I'm going to skip a couple of slides to get into, because of the time. And we take a principles-based approach. Now, I'm not going to read all of those 8 principles, but if you focus on the first 2, we put human rights at the center, and we say we are intentionally inclusive. We promote inclusive and gender-sensitive approaches that leave no one behind. We support governments in over 130 countries. We are present in 107, we have country officers, we have boots on the ground on 170 countries, and we support over 130 countries in their digital projects, in their digital journeys. We support in all the way from policy and strategy development to building digital foundations, to building digital capacity in the governments at societal level. And we start off generally this journey with an assessment which naturally leads to development of strategy, development of policies, and also building products and services, and also building that inclusive ecosystem and building capacities. I'm going to pause a little bit on this slide and focus, if you focus on the right-hand side, we call that the whole of society digital development framework. It's difficult to read the small print in there, but right at the center is inclusive digital transformation, and we don't just focus on the government. We focus on connectivity, physical infrastructure, access, affordability. We focus on people, their digital literacy. We focus on economy, the innovation ecosystem, businesses, financial instruments. We focus on regulation, the policies that is needed. So this whole of government approach, whole of society approach is what we take to the governments as their partner in the digital development journey. And our starting off point is the digital development compass, where we bring about 180 publicly available data sources on a single platform. It's an interactive platform. And then we map it against the 5 pillars that you saw on the framework. Now, stopping here with the presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges, answering the first question that Vijaya put to us. One of the key challenges, obviously, I'm going to come to capacity and data, but before that, commitment from the government as well. And we've seen that commitment should come from the highest level of the government. We've seen certain ministries, the health ministry, to transportation ministry, to social protection, to energy, trying to do digital transformation alone. But the mandate should come from the highest level. So you take this whole of society approach, whole of government approach. A good example of a digital ID system, for example, is Malawi. Anyone from Malawi here? Fantastic. Congratulations. Because just within 6 months, because government had that commitment, they managed to get digital ID for 97% of their population. And that just didn't give a digital ID, that unlocked financial instruments for farmers, for example, which then managed to tap into $25 million worth of financing. And it also provided an opportunity for the government to save about $20 million in ghost payment in pensions, because there is a digital ID system. And that brings me to capacity as well. One of the major problems we see is not having capacity, not having local capacity. I've seen certain governments investing in technology where they don't have capacity to sustain, therefore sometimes perpetually vendor locked into something. So having that local capacity to implement the digital system, also within the government, reskilling, upskilling, and sometimes at a societal level this is needed. The other aspect is the interconnectedness of these systems, like cybersecurity, for example, data privacy. This is of paramount importance. So capacity is needed not just because of the technology you deploy, but in these other areas as well. So it is important governments focus on building these capacities locally with the implementation of digital as well. And the last thing is data governance, getting your data right. Data is the bedrock of this transformation. And in the workshop, we can talk about some other examples and how governments have mitigated this situation. Vijay, not to you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to share the experience of South Africa in digitalizing for the monitoring and evaluation and for the inclusivity of the most vulnerable. I'll try to be quick. That's not mine. Okay, I will continue in the meantime. I'll try to remember what I had there in the presentation. No problem. In my presentation, I had a practical example of the manual data processes and how it has costed us in terms of the non-inclusion of the vulnerable groups in planning and reporting, and also due to the large number of reporting indicators, the data set is large and we could not capture everything, and also some of the indicators were being changed. People were able to just cheat the manual system. So basically we had to move on to developing the digital system for monitoring and evaluation of the government interventions implementation in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. I am not going to share the screens that I had in my presentation, but I will continue. Fortunately, yes, it is not coming up. We experienced challenges in terms of skills when we were developing the system. Thank you so much. We noticed that as much as we, as the monitoring and evaluation expect, this is off. The monitoring and evaluation expect, we had a gap in terms of understanding the developer language. However, we had to teach the developer in terms of them understanding what we are looking for and it took us a longer time for us to get to that part where we both understand each other, and then eventually we managed. And we developed a system where now we are able to capture and plan for the vulnerable groups, which we could not do before. And again, we were able to capture in terms of disasters. We are finding ourselves in the country with much of climate change, the floods that are happening. And also we had a little bit of tornado-ish, I don't know what they call it, but it was, it did cause a havoc in one of the areas in my province. So we are able to capture now from the level of the communities. And what we capture from the community level fits directly to the system that we've already had developed. So this is now saying the communities have a word, and they also have a direct communication to government. And we know what sort of interventions to take to the communities. And we also have a different kind of systems now that are interlinked to the main monitoring and evaluation system that we had developed. So they are mostly the feeder. And then we are able to undertake individual projects of evaluations, but in the end they come back and fit into the main system where we are able to send back the interventions to the communities. And also we have what we call the Operation Sukuma Sake. It's just also one of the mechanisms that we are able to communicate with the communities at local level. And KZN is mostly rural and one of the biggest districts in South Africa. And with its rurality, sometimes very difficult to access. So we also are having now different structures where we monitor at local levels, and we also have government monitors who are capturing data using the app that does not sometimes require that it must have access to connectivity. Therefore, until the data collector is able to get to the connectivity. So all this information gets to feedback to this main system that we had developed. But before, when we had that system, we could not link directly what was happening in the community and how to address the issues that the communities are facing. But due to digitalization, we have managed to do so. And also the system is secured because we had to get a contract with a secured privacy for the information of the people. So basically what we try by all means is to include everyone, but on the other side, make sure that the information is safe. And the challenges that we experience sometimes are the challenges of analyzing the qualitative data, visualizing it to be precise, because it's just many words. So if you see it in the system, then it becomes more difficult. But now we are trying to integrate our system with the AI tool that we are working on in our province. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fuzi, and thank you all for sharing your experiences. I think there's a lot of e-health and use of digital technology in health sector. We saw from Uzbekistan how it was also used in water sector. And a Malawi experience, which Gayan shared, is also, I think, something probably you will discuss in your group discussion. May I now request you to break out into 3 groups. First group will discuss how from your own country experiences or from your organization's experiences, how the challenges in addressing digital public infrastructure was resolved and how private sector was engaged in enabling digital public services. And the second group will discuss the inclusion aspects. I think Futi from South Africa shared how they tried to use digital technology to connect rural population, similar examples and how these issues were addressed in your countries or organizations would be the second group. And the third one is on data issues. I think Aziz also talked about the quality of the data, interoperability challenges, which Gayan raised, as well as the privacy issue. We forget about the individual when we talk about data issues. As an individual, my right to the privacy of the digital data that's been collected. That will be the third group. Please do take 30 minutes to discuss. First, identify one person in your group who would take notes and would come up and share the insights, at least 5 points from the group. And also, if there are language interpretation issues, please let me know. We'll see if we can identify an interpreter for translation. I would now request you to break into 3 groups. One of us will be with any of these groups. So if there's any questions, we'll let you know. I will share with you the 3 questions, the sheet with the 3 questions for you to use. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think now we'll start to listen to the group insights. I have the first group colleague who will be talking about the digital public infrastructure, what they discussed in the group. Please. Yes.
So, hi everyone. In terms of the first group about digital public infrastructure, I'm going to steal a common denominator of the challenges that are in this group. It is about getting the data right. That is one of the things. But to be more specific, one of the main challenges is integration of different systems that we all know about. They exist in different government institutions, in ministries, but they don't speak with each other. So interoperability and integration of data so that we can use for different analytics. Use of digital data for evaluation is so missing capacities in the government to digitize data collection and analyze them. Another issue is related to safety, data protection, because of the digitalization, related to digitalization. Sometimes legislative framework does not enable digitalization, as it has been mentioned in one of the cases that the budget scrutiny legislative framework does not enable proper budget scrutiny, so that a different system to speak with each other. Integration, there are many data in different systems, but their utilization requires integration of data, and in this regard, accessibility to the data and restrictions and on availability of data is another challenge as well. In some countries, there are different priorities and challenges. Therefore, also digitalization for the purposes of evaluation is not a priority in some of the countries. In some of them, the data collection is carried out manually with Excel dashboards or even in written formats. Access to internet, to proper infrastructure and internet is one of a challenge in some of the cases, and the capacities to use digital tools, again, it is a challenge. So finally, all these are related. There are different stages of challenges in terms of capacities that we have called, be it in analyzing, be it on using these digital tools, and also enabling the presentation and visualization. But yeah, integration is a common challenge in all of the aspects, and getting the data right, as it has been mentioned in the beginning. Thank you very much. Oh, my name is Vedat Sagonieva from Kosovo.
From the data group, Arjun, would you like to come up?
Hi everyone, my name is Arjun Kaushik. I'm with the Global Evaluation Initiative. I'm going to dive in straight into this. So we had a rather general conversation, and then we focused a little more into security and individual rights. The themes that emerged out of our conversation were 4 things. First, the discussion around open source and proprietary systems, and then the discussion on standalone versus integrated or customer-facing versus internal-facing systems. Third, how does anonymizing data work? And fourth, what are the checks and balances in place for governments or, well, any institution to access your data? So first of all, we took example on the first front, which is open source or proprietary. We took examples of how Georgia and Uzbekistan went about things. For instance, in Georgia, which is a much smaller population, they ended up buying a system from IBM, I believe, and implementing that, which was much quicker. Everything was end-to-end done in 6 months. vis-a-vis Uzbekistan, which ended up using an open source system and starting from scratch, but fortunately is leading to creating an entire ecosystem within the country on how the system can be improved over the years, and hopefully will lead to better capabilities in the future. Then secondly, on standalone and integrated systems, we focused our conversation essentially upon how when we have data which is more customer facing, for example, getting passports, getting your birth certificates and other things, it suddenly becomes much easier because those services are paid for by citizens or customers. Vis-a-vis when data has to be shared between different systems, because even now we have data stored in silos and communicating between ministries has been difficult, if not the toughest thing in the world apparently. Third, we spoke a little about how data anonymization works. And the example that we took is, for example, in Uzbekistan, between 3 parameters, at least one of them need to be anonymized so that you cannot pinpoint who's the person that is being spoken about. In Uzbekistan, the criteria was anonymizing at least between the last name, date of birth, and the address. And finally, the discussion led more into how checks and balances should be in place for the government on how to access your data. We spoke about different models. One of them, for example, in India, where there's an independent authority that was set up to store your data and manage that, vis-a-vis in Estonia, where there's an appeal system in place where in case you feel that your data has been used by a government authority, you can go to the courts and appeal against it, I believe within a month. And then finally, how in Uzbekistan, there is a ministry which has been designated to protect your data and be the watchdog. That was the end of our discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Arjun. And from the inclusion group, who's going to present? Please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. My name is Janine Pretorius. I'm from the Clear AA Center based in Johannesburg. So in our group, we had a very rich discussion and we had reflections from several countries. I think let me start with South Africa and India, where we definitely saw some similarities around the digital divides, which were along the urban versus rural divide. And so India, as you know, is a very diverse, very big country. 30% of the population still lives on below $1 a day. So what we find is that in the urban spaces, there's access to telephones, there's access to services, there's access to internet and all of that, but there's still issues around network connectivity, again, divided along rural and urban divides. So there have been some reflections on some of the apps that are working well. Again, there's pockets of excellence that we do see across these countries. So some of those reflections are, there's an app or a tool that was mentioned called the digital benefit transfer. So for example, if agriculture is running a program and so they would deposit that money directly to the account. So what this does, it reduces the chances of corruption. In South Africa as well, we talked about some examples of where technology works well and digitalization within the public sector. So for example, the South African Revenue Services works really well. They know how to get our money. So that really works well. But then if you have like or you compare to Home Affairs, which is responsible for the issuing of passports, ID documents, that's not as effective. So it's a bit slow, it's getting better, but definitely a lot slower. So there's these inconsistencies amongst the services, depending on the department as well. Some more reflections that we had on a country like Mongolia, which is quite big, but a small population. They are doing really well. They're quite advanced in terms of their digitalization. A lot of their services are digitalized, notifications of different kinds of services are available. But some of the challenges around age and the aging population, and it's something I think we saw amongst many countries, is there's an aversion to technology around age. In South Africa, the case, especially we use the example in education, a lot of the teachers, for example, are averse to using technology in the classrooms, and that's because of their age. A large majority of them are 50 plus, and so of course, the resistance to using technology and change and the kind of attitude and culture towards change is problematic. And then lastly, some reflections that came out of Malaysia. What the Ministry of Communications does is they pool money around digital coverage, and so they would invest that money in areas that need it the most. Although they use 5G, there's a lot of trees in Malaysia, so coverage and connectivity is still a bit of a challenge there. Someone also reflected on sort of basic skills that are still missing, although there might be a demand, for GIS and sort of more of the sophisticated technology, but we still see an absence in basic skills. And then lastly, just to kind of reflect on what are the most excluded sectors, we found that the agriculture and protection welfare are the most excluded sectors, but the least, or the best rather, are health, education, and sort of the financial sectors. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was very comprehensive. May I now turn to the panelists for their concluding remarks? Please keep it to 1.5 minutes. Can I start with you, Aziza? Yeah.
Thank you so much. I would like to make a very specific 3 points after hearing 2 breakout groups, but also having kind of afterthought. Number one, I think it's really important that we widen our sources of data for evaluation purposes. And UNEC would say that this should not be like before it was statistical data, now it's also administrative data and alternative data sources. Alternative would include metering, GIS, machine equipment data. Administrative is all your data from the registries. In all your governments, in all your countries, you have hundreds of different registries. Each of the public registry creates data. Every minute it's being, communicating on something. It's just a matter of taking this data and making it part of the use for evaluation purposes. Second, about the quality of data, I think it's important, maybe just also a proposal off the top of my head, be it any project, so development assistance, or be it government expenditure, before the funding comes, it's important to identify what type of data this project will generate. In addition to outcome level at the very end, what type of data should be designed before the money starts coming, so that it's never a problem to, make a monitoring and evaluation as you go. And in what format it should be done. So no more, wordy reports, but actually structured type of documentation, standard forms for the data to be collected, that then it would be easy to triangulate, compare with different type of data, and actually come up with something. And third, very important, we heard today that it's expensive. It's not expensive, I can tell you by our experience. Someone who can sit around a good computer and work with the big data sometimes require a basic skill of SQL and Python. It doesn't even require higher education anymore. It's 4 to 5 months of courses of any between, 18 years old and 25 would be fine. If it's good computer and one trained in SQL and Python, the person will be able to start crunching your big data at no time. So train 100 people in SQL and Python in your countries, make them part of the evaluation endeavor, you will see the difference a lot. And also bring them to the communities as well. Make it dispersed across the country, not elitist, white-collar people sitting in the capital. You will see the difference coming. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The takeaway from our group discussion, I noted that there is an element of the reduction in corruption because there is a straightforward communication. There's no middleman between the user at the community level and the approver at a certain level. And again, it is faster. The turnaround time is much faster than it was before in all specific areas that we had discussed. And also there is a level of accountability because once every processes are digitalized, the accounting officer or the politician has to answer, because at the end of the day, everything is in black and white and it's there in the system. And also over time, there will be some saving. For now, in the beginning, when there has to be the infrastructure development, it's very expensive. But as the infrastructure is there, the only expense that could be there would be the maintenance of the infrastructure. So they would be saving over time compared to the manual. But again, we noted that there is a sensitivity in culture. So if we plan to leave no one behind, we also need to be sensitive that the older ones are hard to, they don't want to unlearn and learn the new things. And lastly, I think I've spoken about the infrastructure burden while addressing the coverage to leave no one behind. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So to really quickly to build on that, one fundamental factor in success of digitalizing public services is trust. And how you build that trust on citizens with their government, ministries sharing data among each other, trust among institutions. How do you build that trust is by being accountable, being transparent, and having the right safeguards. Because this is something you cannot get wrong, because once trust is broken, there's no point digitalizing any public services. People will not use it. So having that safeguards in place, having the right capacities to manage that safeguards is fundamental to getting this right and getting people involved. Inclusiveness, not just design for people, but design with them so they feel included in this process is extremely important. So let's build that inclusive future together.
Also have two things to add to this today's insightful discussion. And I want to say that digitalizing the public sector is not merely an option, but an imperative that we all need to do as we embrace this digitalization or digital transformation in the whole world. We must acknowledge that the challenges still exist. Issues like data privacy, security, and digital divide do exist, and these problems need to be addressed. Then only in this way that all citizens can benefit from these digital advancements. And first, maybe we should invest more in training and resources to equip the public with the skills that they need to leverage digital tools and to raise their awareness of their own data privacy. And second, I think that digitalizing the public sector does not necessarily equal to using the most up-to-date technology. I agree that we need to do the digitalization assessment first and to have an all-round understanding of the region's background and the capacities. And based on that, can we figure out what is the most suitable technology and products that can best promote the destined region's digitalization process. And digitalizing the public sector actually, I think, brings more needs, or we can see new needs to the pre-evaluation process. And this is the problem this is the assessment that we need to solve maybe in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we are on time, actually. I wish to take this opportunity to thank the panelists again, Jiamin, Gayan Peiris, Fatima Zibuka, and Aziza Omarova. Thank you so much for sharing your country experience. I know this is a huge topic on one aspect of digital legal identity. Actually, we can discuss the whole day. I know we didn't have much insights on how to engage private sector, but I know you can take these discussions outside and continue with it. There are fantastic examples the panelists shared from their own countries. Gayan mentioned about Malawi. There are very interesting lessons to learn from Malawi, how they went through the trajectory of where they are now in terms of digital legal identity. South Africa, India has a digital stack, as they call. They have a series of examples they wish to share, how things did not work out, what they did, about how they went about it. And I think each of you have something to share from your countries. Please do continue this discussion. I would also like to thank our note taker, Arjun Kaushik, who was very carefully noting down what was going on here. I would like to also thank all the group presenters. I think the the organizers have something to give them away. I would now welcome the volunteer to share that. Can you please step out, please? Can the group presenters come to the front, please?